There are two completely different versions of Kanye West living at the same time. One exists in headlines, chaotic, inflammatory, impossible to defend without caveats or discomfort, that Kanye dominates news cycles, screenshots, and outrage loops.
It was interesting. A friend of mine told me that Chris and Kim had called him because he had influence inside of the Black community.
He's reduced to fragments, a quote without context, a clip without history, a moment frozen and repeated until it becomes his entire identity. The other Kanye exists somewhere else entirely. He exists in our headphones, in unfinished leaks passed between fans, in albums that still sound like the future even years later. That Kanye is still brilliant, still disruptive, still unmistakably Kanye. And the uncomfortable truth is this: most people have already decided which one they believe in. For the general public, Kanye West is over. A closed chapter. A cautionary tale taught in media literacy classes and Twitter threads. His name no longer signals innovation, it signals controversy, fatigue, something people feel obligated to denounce before they're allowed to move on. But for his fans, it's worse than that. Because being a Kanye fan in 2026 doesn't feel like loyalty anymore. It feels like waiting for clarity, waiting for coherence, waiting for a version of him that might not exist anymore, or might never return in the form they want. And that raises the question nobody wants to ask out loud. Are we actually supporting Kanye? Or are we mourning who he used to be? Are we rooting for a comeback? Or wishing time would rewind? Because here's the truth most people avoid admitting. Sonically, Kanye will probably always be brilliant. His ear for sound, texture, rhythm, and emotional tension hasn't vanished. It's embedded in how he thinks. That part of him doesn't age out. But brilliance alone was never what made Kanye the defining artist of the 2000s and 2010s. And that's where this story really begins. Kanye was never just a producer, and he was never just a rapper. What made Kanye West different, what separated him from everyone else in his era, was that his music never arrived alone. It arrived carrying an entire belief system. In the 2000s and 2010s, Kanye didn't just release albums, he released worldviews. Each era wasn't just a sound, it was a question aimed directly at culture. What if vulnerability could be masculine? What if confidence and insecurity could exist in the same verse? What if rap didn't need to pretend it was invincible? What if maximalism wasn't tacky, but honest? What if ambition didn't have to apologize? What if fashion, art, religion, ego, doubt, and contradiction could all live inside the same body of work without being flattened into a single message? Kanye didn't answer these questions gently. He forced them into the mainstream. That was his real genius.
Shoes. But if you guys are investing in the arts, y'all want to invest in this school in Brazil, y'all want to go to Africa, I'm standing up and I'm telling you, I am Warhol. I am the #1 most impactful artist of our generation. I am Shakespeare in the flesh. Walt Disney, Nike, Google. Now, who's gonna be the Medici family and stand up and let me create more? Or do you wanna marginalize me till I'm out of my moment?
Not sound design, not hit making, but alignment. Kanye had an almost unnatural ability to feel where culture was moving before it knew how to describe itself. He sensed shifts before they hardened into trends. He moved before the permission structure existed. And then he made those shifts unavoidable. That's why his albums didn't just succeed. They reframed what popular culture was allowed to be. They expanded the emotional vocabulary of hip-hop. They blurred boundaries that weren't supposed to blur. They made sincerity dangerous again. But that power came with a cost. Because when your greatest skill is intuition, you're always walking ahead of the crowd. And eventually, you're walking alone. Here's the part of the Kanye conversation that makes people uncomfortable. A lot of the time, not always, but often, Kanye isn't actually wrong. He's early. Too early for headlines. Too early for nuance. Too early for a culture that prefers clean moral narratives over complicated human reality. The problem isn't that Kanye doesn't see something coming. The problem is that he refuses to translate it. He doesn't soften instinct into explanation. He doesn't convert feeling into disclaimers. He speaks in declarations, not footnotes. And when raw intuition collides with a media ecosystem built on outrage, speed, and simplification, the message doesn't survive the delivery. That's why controversy hasn't ended Kanye's relevance. It's sustained it. Every cultural era needs a figure who forces unresolved questions into the open, someone who destabilizes comfort and refuses to play the role they're assigned. Kanye does that instinctively, recklessly. sometimes destructively. The public reads this as chaos. Fans read it as frustration, but culturally it functions as friction, and friction is where attention lives. Kanye has always been a stress test. For free speech, for morality, for how much contradiction society is willing to tolerate in a person we still want to call genius. And whether people like it or not, the world has never fully figured out how to ignore him. Which brings us to now. 2026 isn't an era of redemption arcs. It's not an era of carefully worded apologies or image rehabilitation tours. It's not about being liked, forgiven, or welcomed back into polite consensus. This is an era defined by aggression, by polarization, by people choosing sides and refusing to soften their edges. Truth, or at least claimed truth, has become louder than agreement. Conviction now outperforms consensus. Volume beats diplomacy. And that's the perfect environment for Kanye West. Because Kanye has never thrived in harmony, he thrives in conflict. If he returns to music this year, it doesn't need to be safe. It doesn't need to be comforting. It doesn't need to explain itself. It needs to be precise. Not polished, but accurate. Not palatable, but intentional. Honest in the way only someone completely unconcerned with approval can be. This isn't about fixing his image. It's about leaning fully into what he's always been best at. Intuition without permission. In a time when culture rewards certainty over consensus, when people want answers more than balance, when clarity matters more than kindness, Kanye doesn't need redemption. He just needs a microphone. And whether people love him or hate him for it, 2026 might finally be the year where that reality makes sense again. Maybe the mistake was thinking Kanye ever needed to come back, because comebacks are about restoration, about returning to something recognizable. And Kanye has never been interested in restoring anything. What we've been calling the fall might simply be the cost of seeing too far ahead, of trusting intuition more than approval, of choosing conviction over consensus in a culture that punishes anyone who refuses to play clean roles. For years, fans have been asking the wrong question. Not, can Kanye be great again? But can we still recognize greatness when it doesn't ask for permission? Because the world has changed, and so has the role Kanye was always meant to play within it. In an era addicted to outrage, where truth is blunt, messy, and unapologetic, where people don't want comfort, they want certainty, Kanye doesn't feel out of place anymore. He feels inevitable. So maybe 2026 isn't about redemption at all. Maybe it's about alignment, about an artist who was never meant to be understood in real time, finally meeting a culture that speaks his language. Not harmony, not peace, but clarity through conflict. And whether we're ready for it or not, that has always been Kanye West's favorite moment to speak.